Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Since we finished season 1 last week, today we're taking a short break from our episode by episode discussion. Instead, we'll be discussing season 1 holistically. So, like we like to start every episode, we're going to do a brief summary here, but this time instead of an episode, it's season 1. All right, so after getting dumped and fired by her boyfriend, Fran finds herself as the nanny to the Sheffield children, Brighton, Grace, and Maggie. Her arrival brings big changes to the family. Wallflower Maggie comes out of her shell, starts dating, and finds her personality and friends her own age. Smart Alec Brighton finds a caretaker he can't scare off, from whom he can learn valuable life lessons. And Gracie, well, Gracie no longer needs her imaginary friend because she has Fran to love and play with. The adults in the Sheffield household also get more than they bargained for with Fran's arrival. Niles has found a new friend and confidant. Cece has acquired a newfound competition for Maxwell's attention. And Maxwell has found a woman who not only challenges him and makes him a better father, but also helps him grow personally and professionally. With her unique fashion and parenting style, Fran helps the Sheffields navigate problems big and small, including Brighton's smoking, the death of Gracie's imaginary friend, Maggie almost failing gym class. She also helps Maxwell's play become a success, and she repairs Cece's strained relationship with her father. When faced with the option of returning to Flushing and marrying her longtime boyfriend Danny, Fran realizes that she's outgrown her old life and chooses to remain with the Sheffields. Bernadette, do you want to highlight anything that I missed in my brief summary?
No, I think that's a great summary. Yeah, I think that's great.
Awesome. Well, obviously, I didn't hit every episode and every point, but we'll get into our discussion, I think, now. So I guess, unless you want to start elsewhere, I kind of want to talk a little bit about like what we saw as the high points or the low points in the season.
Yeah. No, I agree. Again, I mean, there were a couple of episodes that I believe you and I both were on the same page that we weren't that into. So I think the episodes that you and I had kind of highlighted before is the nanny-in-law and Maggie the model.
Yep.
I think those were the only ones that were below a 3.
I think those are the only ones that we both. Yes, that's the
Yes.
key.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I think with both of those, and we can clarify which episode numbers those are.
Episodes 10 and 13, I believe.
Yeah. So I think with both of those were the low points. As a reminder to listeners, the nanny-in-law was the episode where Mr. Sheffield's former nanny came to visit. And again, we learn about, I guess, the past torrid affair between her and Niles.
Yep.
And then Maggie the models when Mr. Sheffield's former girlfriend comes back.
Chloe Simpson is her name. Yes,
comes back in the picture, and there's this whole kind of thing about, okay, is Maggie going to try to become a model?
Right.
And now that I'm talking about it, saying it out loud, I think it's interesting that both of those episodes had to do with a female figure from Mr. Sheffield's life coming back into it. I hadn't realized that until I started talking about this.
That's an interesting point. I thought you were going to say, be even more general, like, oh, it's interesting we both didn't like episodes where there's a guest star who features so prominently. Like maybe we just don't like, ancillary cast members or something. Yeah. But no, you went even more specific.
Yeah, because I guess we both liked Stop the Wedding, I Want to Get Off, which has his sister as a guest star. So I don't think it's like we dislike every guest starred one, but I think it's interesting those two in particular. And I guess part of it too in both of those episodes, I recall talking about my discomfort with some of the age issues. Um, because if you recall, the nanny-in-law, we both had questions about, okay, well, what's the actual age gap between? Um,
Niles and Clara.
yes. And then Maggie the model, there was that gross gyrating photographer.
Yes, the photographer. Yes. Who I think was meant to be unpleasant.
Yes. Yes. But but yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on that?
I'm looking at how we've ranked the episodes previously, and you're right, those are the only two episodes that we both agreed we both ranked below a 3, and I think both of them we ranked a 2.5. Um,
Mhm.
I I remember when we talked about Maggie the model, I specifically said I don't like the idea of thinking about Maxwell having a past with anyone other than Sarah, his now
Mm.
deceased wife. And
Mhm.
I hated um how like he was in like puppy love with Chloe Simpson. And
Mhm.
I found Chloe Simpson to be just so totally, I mean, again, her character was meant to be just so totally self-centered and like basically heartless. Like
Mhm.
she can't even like tell Maxwell that she's not going to go to the Hamptons with him. Like she's like, "Oh, well, he should know better than to count on me. Like
Mhm.
he should have learned by now."
Yeah.
It's just like,
Mhm.
I don't care for her. And then for the nanny-in-law, I just, you know what? Maybe it is about those two episodes because I realized Maggie the model also has this. It's where we have this guest star who's basically like pushing Fran to the side,
Mhm.
telling Fran she's not like implying that Fran is not good enough, that Fran is not. I don't want to say that she's not the like center of the family because she is, but she isn't. But just like
Mhm.
that, there's a constant criticism of Fran that's like
Mhm.
underlying the episode. And with the nanny-in-law, it's very obvious, because at one point Clara says that the title nanny it must be earned, and that Fran
Mhm.
hadn't implying that Fran hadn't earned it. She was constantly questioning Fran's judgment. And then in Maggie the model, I mean, again, you have this guest star, in this case Chloe Simpson, who can't even get Fran's name right, calling her
Mhm.
Fern.
Mhm.
Maybe we're just like being protective of Fran, and we just do not like it when people are mean to her.
Maybe. Maybe. Although again, well, yeah, because interestingly, we both were not super keen on the gym teacher episode. Um, Not as low of a ranking as
Right.
the two we're discussing. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. Um, so yeah, in terms of highlights, I in looking through our stuff, I don't believe we ever both gave an episode a 5 at the same time, but we had episodes where we were relatively close, like
Mhm.
5 with with a 4.5 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right that we we have not yet ranked an episode the same episode of 5, which is
Mhm.
kind of surprising.
Mhm.
Um, for some that come close, Here Comes the Brood, or it
Mhm.
comes close like that, I think is my favorite episode in season 1. So of course I gave it a 5. You gave it a 4.5.
Mhm.
The pilot, I gave a 5. You gave it a 4. That's not
Mhm.
as close, but like it did
Mhm.
also set up the entire series. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it needs credit there. Others that I think we were close on was, as you mentioned, Stop the Wedding, I Want to Get Off.
Mhm.
We both really like that. Franny's Choice is
Mhm.
another one. Oh, I probably shouldn't just spit them all out.
No, no,
Franny's,
no. Mhm.
I was going to say, kind of like what you just did before for the others. Franny's Choice is the one where Fran's presented with the option of going back to Flushing and marrying Danny Imperiali, and she chooses not to. Stop the
Mhm.
Wedding, I Want to Get Off is the one where Maxwell's sister gets married, not to the Duke who we expect, but instead to her chauffeur. Um, the pilot obviously is what started this entire series. And Here
Mhm.
Comes the Brood is the episode where Gracie runs away from Manhattan to Flushing and goes to the wedding with Fran and her mother.
Mhm.
And they have that wonderful scene about how they love each other, and Fran doesn't get paid anymore for loving them. So
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah. And then we had just some solid, like we were both fours on, like throughout, because there were actually several instances of us giving fours together.
mhm.
So Imaginary Friend, The Show Must Go On, Deep Throat, Schlepped Away, um, Ode to Barbara Joan, and I don't remember Mama. So yeah, it is interesting though, because there were several instances in which you and I had very different opinions on
Correct.
the episodes as well. Um, Now, part of this, again, we can later get into if we want to revise any of our ratings in retrospect. Because I know, for instance, episode 2, Smoke Gets in Your Lies, I'd kind of want to bump mine down, but I don't think I'd be as down to a 3 as you are. So, like, there's still some room to change that. But again, off the top of, just looking at the list, Smoke It's in Your Lies was one of those types of episodes. The butler, the husband, the wife, and her mother. You did not seem, you didn't really enjoy it. I did.
Right. That
um,
was the one where Niles was trying to get into the Butlers Association, and
yes. And
Fran's relatives from Boca are there, and just all kinds of insanity
yes,
ensued.
where Fran is pretending to be married to Mr. Sheffield, but Niles is pretending to be Mr. Sheffield, and then Mr. Sheffield has to pretend to be Niles. All kinds of, um,
Shenanigans.
exactly.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, that one
uh,
was where we had a huge divergence in our
yes,
opinion.
yes, because mine was a 4.75 and yours was a 2.5. So,
Yeah.
and then a plot for Nanny, you gave it a 5, I gave it a 3.5. Um, let me,
The
do you
plot for Nanny, for
remember?
those who do not have the catalog memorized and use their brain cells for other purposes, that's the one where we celebrate Fran's quote unquote 25th birthday, and her
Yeah,
mother
yeah,
buys
yeah.
her the double cemetery plot to set her up with the handsome funeral director, Stevie.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
And
stand by my 5. Continue.
yeah, I was just checking, yeah, my notes on that. But yeah, I'm trying to see, was there any other?
I think those were the main divergences. Often we weren't really that far off.
Mhm.
Like sometimes I would give something a 3.5, you'd give something a 3,
Yeah,
or I'd give something a 4 and you'd give it a 3, or vice versa. So like,
4.5 or, yeah, with it we were within a point or a half a point with,
right.
from each other.
And what's particularly interesting, I don't know if you noticed, but I calculated the averages to see
Mhm.
the average rating for you versus the average rating for me, and we weren't really that far off.
Yeah, no, we were very close. So for our listeners who do not have access to our spreadsheet,
Thank you. Yes.
Debbie's, do you want to say yours?
Sure. I'm at 3.81818 repeating.
Yes. And I am at 3.806818182. So very, very close.
Exactly.
And an average. Again, I think mine will slightly change a bit, potentially. Um,
We'll get there.
yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
But yeah, so overall though, I think, we were kind of on the same page on highs and lows, except for where we greatly diverged our opinion.
Exactly.
And then for the most part, I think though we were um kind of near each other in terms of ratings.
So let me ask a slightly different question. Instead of
Mhm.
looking at the cold hard numbers with our very scientific way of ranking the episodes, what about like high and low points, like plot wise, not just like episode
Mhm.
wise?
Hmm, that's interesting. I mean, so
And for the record, this will, if we want, we can tie this in. I'm also curious to hear about your thoughts on how the characters have developed over the course of the
mhm,
season, part 1 and part 2. I know these characters very well. Like they're basically my family at this point. But I'm curious about what you think of the different characters. So if
Mhm.
you want to take that together or separate,
Yeah.
it's up to you.
So it's interesting because looking back, because obviously this has been a journey,
Hmm.
and time has elapsed since we first started this and up until now. So when I think back, and I, I might twist this a little in terms of just like memorable moments, like things that I don't have to go back and refresh myself on. Like these are just things that have stuck with me
Hmm.
throughout the season. So again, the scene in Imaginary Friend when they're in the kitchen and Fran kills the imaginary friend by eating her.
Correct. She
Um,
was sitting on a cookie,
yeah.
and then she
Um,
spits her out, and they try to perform resuscitation.
that scene is just very memorable.
Yes.
Um, again, for me, in terms of shenanigans and stuff, just that whole scene where everything unravels in the butler, the husband, the wife, and her mother, where it's
Hmm.
just chaos, where Niles is pretending to be Maxwell, Maxwell's pretending to be Niles, Fran's pretending to be married, all of that kind of stuff.
The
That's
children are enjoying it.
yes, that's a memorable kind of scene for me.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think there's some very poignant moments. Um, like you mentioned, here comes the brood, that whole scene between Fran and Maggie, not
Gracie.
Maggie, Gracie. Um, and then too, I mean, Franny's choice also has a lot of poignant moments.
Can I just
And
mention that
mhm.
we did the entire show on Franny's Choice and didn't once mention the title of the episode as a play
Oh,
on Sophie's Choice.
yeah.
So I had to correct
Gotta
that.
insert that now. Yes, yes,
Continue.
yeah. So um, again, I overall, and this is not a particular scene or anything, but it was nice to see Maxwell's relationships with the children grow,
Hmm.
especially from where it started out. Um, I loved watching like the camaraderie between Fran and Niles, and that seemed to happen pretty quickly. Um,
Yeah, it did.
would you agree? Like,
It, yeah. Um, I mean, kind of in Franny's Choice, there's sort of these reference hints about how close their relationship is. Niles makes the comment along the lines of, "Well, this isn't really goodbye for me. Next week we're going mini golfing
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or bowling, or I can't remember what activity they ended up settling on, but they were going to go see each other the next week."
Hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think within the context of the show, I mean, pretty quickly friends become a member of the household in
Yeah,
terms of the episodes. Wouldn't you agree?
absolutely. Like I'd even go further to say she's a member of the family.
Hmm.
You know,
But I mean, like it happened quickly. Like it's not like there's a lot of growing pains with her being the nanny. Like not a lot of pushback from the kids. Does that make sense?
that's an interesting way to put it. Um, I mean, if you recall, before she even starts, Brighton proclaims, "Well, I hate her,"
Hmm.
and poor Maggie is just so starved for attention. I'm not even sure it's attention, but like a relationship with someone. And
Hmm.
Gracie, I mean, all of the kids sort of push back on her, except for Maggie. Brighton says he hates her, and Gracie says, "You have no idea how complicated I am." But
Yes.
but oh, go ahead.
But by episode two.
Cor- Correct. By episode 2, she's settled in.
Yes. Yes. So there's not like several episodes where it's like she's trying to win them over or anything like that. It's basically the pilot. Yeah, you kind of establish everything, but by episode two, she's already, you know, a member of the household.
Oh no, that's a good point.
Hmm.
And sort of, I think Cece points it out in Here Comes the Brood, which is episode 5. That starts with the very domestic scene, I think is the way we phrased it when we talked about that episode, where Fran's getting the kids ready for school, and fixing Maggie's hair and testing Brighton on his multiplication tables, and things like that.
Mhm.
And Cece makes a comment, "Did I miss the wedding?"
Mhm.
or something like that.
Yeah.
No, I guess that's a good point that they're really. Uh, I mean, the the kids just sort of accept her.
Mhm.
Um, and actually, in episode 2, Maxwell has this sort of like light bulb moment where he realizes that Brighton likes Fran, and
Mhm.
Brighton, if you recall, is the reason the last nanny left.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
faked a suicide attempt.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just interesting to see. And so in terms of the characters themselves,
Hmm.
um so of among the three kids, my favorite's Gracie.
Mine too. I'm not gonna lie, mine too. She's wonderful.
Yes, she's very precocious. Again, it's just so funny, like some of the things that come out of her mouth from such a small child
Exactly.
that are so mature, and yet she is a small child. So occasionally, it's. Um, I again, I've mentioned this in a couple of episodes, but there are times that Maggie kind of annoys me,
Yeah.
because he is apt to be very dramatic and quick to kind of snipe or whatever at Fran or try to hurt Fran's feelings.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's happened consistently, throughout the show. Even though she's originally portrayed as someone who's shy, introverted, nice, whatever, like she does have that side to her. And again, she's like what, 14, 15 throughout this
Hmm.
first season. So I believe I mentioned it before. It's kind of like Harry Potter's fifth book, like the kind of broody at times, angsty at times kind of thing. Brighton Brighton's interesting. There are times when he's funny, but there are other times when it just is like I think the writers were thinking a little older for him when
Yeah.
writing for him. Um uh
Like in
I-
episode 1 where they're at the bridal shop and he's under the mannequin skirt and asking, is this mannequin anatomically correct?
yeah, yeah. Because it seems like he's how old? Like
10.
10. Yeah, like seems a little early, but again, I don't know. Anyway, um, it's just kind of weird how consistently he's characterized as being very. It seems it would be more appropriate if he was like 13, 14, like the
Yeah.
very hormonal teenager type of thing, but not really as a 10-year-old, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I mean, I think it's hard for television writers with kids and their ages.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to hit the nail right on the head and get them exactly right. And also
Mm-hmm.
to keep their ages straight.
Yeah, well, and as we saw that throughout, there were some inconsistencies throughout the season in terms of what their ages were.
Correct.
It kind of went back and forth. So yeah, Maxwell, I really like. I'm glad he's grown throughout the season in terms of his relationship with the children.
Hmm.
By no means perfect as Franny's choice. You're already making mistakes.
Exactly.
I'm not even gone yet. It is funny to kind of see the extent to which he is blind to certain dynamics. We've discussed, obviously there's some tension there between Fran and Maxwell, but that's not really necessarily acknowledged by them openly to
Not
others.
quite, no.
And then, uh, and again, and with his relationship with Cece, how at times it just seems like he's oblivious to that, or I don't know if he's just ignoring it, or I don't know.
Right.
There
No,
have been.
it goes back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's sometimes I don't know, it's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of back and forth because there are times you feel like he's more into like maybe Fran or something, not totally aware of it, but then you have those episodes like Maggie the model where, an old flame shows up and he's completely head over here heels, and then there's that question in Franny's choice when it appears to be he's going on a date or something.
Right.
So, I don't know. Um Niles is very funny, dry humor. There are certain times it goes a little beyond, you know, but but I love his dynamics with Fran. Um their kind of camaraderie, um
What about
his
his
just dry sense
dynamic with
of humor.
Cece?
So that's where it's an interesting dynamic, and at times it feels like maybe it goes a little too, but like at least it's it's not just one-sided.
Hmm.
Like Cece also gives what she gets kind of
Right.
thing. I feel if it was totally one-sided where Niles is the one who's always making those type of comments towards Cece, I would not um enjoy it as much just because that feels, just mean.
Hmm.
But they have that kind of bantering, bickering type of relationship. You know what? A little bit like Benedict and Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing.
That's an excellent comparison.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. To all of our other literary nerds out there, you know what we're talking about.
Yes.
For those of you who
Yeah.
don't, go read Shakespeare. It'll be great.
Yes. And it's not a spoiler because it's been out for hundreds of years. But yeah. But yeah, and then Fran is very interesting. Like I like her. She's very warm with the kids.
She is.
Again, she's uh an unconventional nanny, as
Yes.
uh, as Maxwell points out, but that's what they love about her.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I'm not always with her on the fashion stuff, but I don't claim to be a fashionista. Like that's not my realm. Um, it is interesting, certain times the whole Franny's choice portion of it a little bit, s- you know, you would I don't know how to phrase this. Like you would think that she wouldn't even consider going back.
Right.
But then at the same time, to some extent, you might understand if you are getting older and you are wanting certain things, or at least you always thought you wanted a particular
Person.
thing. Yes, that's where you could waver.
But I mean, I think it's also the shared history.
Mhm.
Like they were pre-engaged for 3 years.
Mhm.
All of
And
a
she
sudden he's
obviously is on good terms with his parents, or at least his mother.
exactly.
But yeah, so Cece is again just one of those characters. She's the butt of a lot of jokes. Again, sometimes to the extent that I feel a little bad for her, but she also gives what she gets. She holds her own. So
Hmm.
it's funny though that I'm trying to recall which episode it was. I think it must have been Maggie the model, maybe, when Cece, Fran, and Niles were all kind of on the same page with not liking.
Yeah, I think
Um,
they all hated Chloe.
yes,
Yes.
and they kind of had a moment in the kitchen
Yep.
where they were all, um,
Hating on her.
yes, yes. So, um, again, and there are times when you can see those seeds of like an actual potential friendship. Um, for instance, when in Ode to Barbara Joan, where Fran does the right thing, that even though she really wants to see Barbara Streisand's, she insists that, um, that Cece go with her
Exactly.
father. So it's interesting. What about you?
Oh, hold on. You missed at least two characters. You missed Sylvia and you missed Val. You missed
Oh,
Val.
sorry. Oh, okay. Um,
For the record, I don't think this is much of a spoiler. They continue on the series for the rest of the series,
mhm.
so that's why I'm
So
including them.
yeah, so Val, we didn't see a whole ton of. We occasionally saw her pop in throughout the series. Again, I think when we discussed Franny's choice, I just thought it was very interesting that she was so for them getting back together, but then kind of like towards the end of that conversation makes it like, oh, well, you can this time you can break up with him.
Right.
Again, I mean, Val doesn't come off as very intelligent.
Correct. That does not
Bit of
change
the
for the
a
most
bit of
part.
yeah, a bit of the ditzy um, friend, but again, we haven't. I feel like I still don't. We haven't had a lot of like plot with her. She's just occasionally there when Fran comes back from shopping, or on the phone, or I think somehow she helped in the Christmas episode, the Christmas show.
She was,
Like,
yep. She
but
went to the pawn shop with Fran.
yeah, but she's not a very, like a predominant character in the series. I don't think, at least not in this season.
No,
Um,
that's fair. I'm like glancing ahead to season two, and she's in the first episode of season two. She's not in every episode, but she's there with enough frequency, and I think she appears more frequently as the series goes on.
oh, okay, yeah. Sylvia is very interesting.
She's
I
on a
mean,
lot.
yeah. Well, it's so funny how welcoming she is to the kids.
Hmm.
Even in Here Comes the Brood, like she invites Gracie in with open arms.
Right, and wants to
And
spoil her because she's possibly the only grandchild she's ever going to have from
mhm.
Fran.
And in Franny's choice, again, when she initially thinks that Fran's engaged or potentially engaged to Maxwell, she's like, "Oh, great, a built-in family and all that kind of stuff."
Right, your
Which,
hips will thank you.
yes, which is like nice and refreshing because sometimes you would worry that, you know, she might be more wary
Hmm.
of step grandchildren or something like that. So it's nice that she's so welcoming and, open arms kind of thing. Like, yes, you're a member of the family. She welcomes them in, when their travel plans get
Get snowed
canceled by
out,
a
yes.
snowstorm and stuff. But um but again, I think she's well intentioned, but there are times too where she doesn't necessarily know what's best.
Correct. I mean, but I think that's sort of a reflection of the character's humanity, right? Like humans
Yes.
often don't know what's best for them.
Mhm.
Like we try, but we don't know. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Um,
yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I I love Fran. I It sticks with me when you and I were talking about. I think it was the pilot because I sort of started asking you before you had any real basis. What did you think of the characters? And I think one of the first things you said about Fran was that she was so self assured, that she had
Mhm.
such great self confidence, and that stuck with me since we talked about it. Because you're right, she does. She is
Mhm.
very sure of who she is, and um, her moral compass is set. Like she doesn't depend on anyone else for validation.
Mhm.
And I think that's great. Um, Maxwell is still clearly mourning his wife, and he doesn't really know how to handle his children without her. And so it's good that Fran's helping him figure that out.
Mhm.
Cece is Cece's delightful in some ways, and in other ways she's a total jerk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about what's to come for her, and I look forward to discussing that. Niles is great. Niles is just flat out wonderful and hilarious. And the
Mhm.
children, I mean, you're right. Maggie is annoying, but she's a teenager, so that's to be expected. Gracie, I think, is the one who does the most. I don't even know if it's really growth, but she's the one who like I think benefits most directly from Fran being there.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, for example, in I Don't Remember Mama, Fran is the one who's encouraging them to talk about Sarah, something that they wouldn't do otherwise. And so poor Gracie would be stuck not being able to remember her mom,
Mm-hmm.
or Fran's decision to try to pull Grace to cut Gracie's therapy down a little bit. She also is Gracie's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, in Sunday in the Park with Fran, basically they forced her to take little Frank to the park, but Fran tries to stand up and says, look, I'm in charge of the kids. If Gracie doesn't want to play with a little boy, she doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't really work out there, but at least Gracie is someone in her corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
who understands her, just
right.
fundamentally.
Yeah. Gracie's not your average child. I mean, I think,
Yes.
as Maxwell puts it, Gracie senses doom at Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think. Maggie, we've already covered, is annoying, but she also has benefited greatly from Fran being there. She's
Yeah.
been forced out of her shell. And
Mm-hmm.
Query, kind of like what you were saying before, like she's painted as being kind of introverted, but query whether she actually is introverted or just didn't have any friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then Brighton, what else is there to say about Brighton?
Mm-hmm.
We will see a lot more of Sylvia. We will see more of Val. One thing that, kind of to your point before about how things are not always consistent in scripts, like sometimes it seems as if Sylvia forgets she has another daughter and grandchildren through the other daughter.
Yeah. Like, I mean, to the extent that I wasn't even sure that there was one until you just said it.
There you go. Yeah. No, Fran is the younger daughter. Her older sister's name is Nadine. Nadine has two daughters. Spoiler, we never meet the daughters. We do meet Nadine. We do meet Nadine's husband. Um, that'll be a fun episode.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't meet her kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah. And of course, we don't meet Morty officially until season 6. So
Mm-hmm.
more to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess just as we're kind of talking in general with this season, um, do you feel like there were any plot holes that have stuck with you or anything like that? Because we've mentioned there, there's some inconsistency sometimes. The only reason I say this is because when talking about Maggie, I still have no idea what happened to Eddie.
Yeah, he's gone. He's
Yeah.
gone.
He's just like, there was no, because it's interesting. I would have expected um, that it be a plot point of her first breakup and how she deals with that.
It,
Nope.
nope. No,
Nope.
there that's not no, that's not there.
Mm-hmm.
But actually kind of along those lines, you know, in the fourth episode, the Nuchschlepp, you know, Maxwell will only let Maggie go on her first date if Fran goes with her,
Mm-hmm.
as the chaperone. And I mean, I guess sort of in that episode it's resolved because but I guess not fully to my satisfaction, because Maggie does continue to date, and there's no discussion of her ever having a chaperone again,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. I mean, there's one episode, minor spoiler, where she's, I think, 16, maybe 17, and she's dating someone who's 25.
Oh my gosh. I'll
Okay,
have a lot to say.
I'm sure you will, but in that episode, Fran is then dating Maggie's boyfriend's friend, who is also 25.
Oh my gosh.
So in that instance, Fran does sort of act as a chaperone, but it's definitely different than in the Nuchschlepp episode,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where Maggie's going out with someone who's much closer to her age.
Mm-hmm.
Things that stuck with me. I mean, that was just something I was thinking about, that how in later episodes, Maggie doesn't really have that issue because Maggie does date. Um, I wish I could point to something and be like, this haunts me and I can't sleep at night because it bothers me so much. But no, I don't think there's anything like that sticks with me. Is there
That's fair enough.
is there anything you other than Eddie that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, just again, I would be curious about just the age between like Maxwell and Niles.
That's a good question.
Because again, part of the reason we were so kind of, or at least I was weirded out with the nanny-in-law was it was made to seem that Niles and Maxwell essentially grew up together, which would mean they were within a couple of years of each other. They're
Correct.
not necessarily the same age, but you would think because when you're younger, it feels like age difference, like
It is a bigger
a couple
deal.
of years is a big age difference.
Correct.
So again, I would just be kind of curious about that aspect of it.
Okay, so on that front, two comments. First, there's an episode, it's at least one episode where I don't want to say we meet, but we see young Maxwell and we see young Niles and we see young Fran, and they kind of sort of interact with each other. And so it seems like they're about the same age, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then I'm thinking of the episode titled The Two Mrs Sheffields, which we have not seen yet. It's in season 3, where we meet Maxwell's mother. And she makes a comment about how you don't raise a child for the 4 years before boarding school and come away with nothing, which indicates to me that Maxwell went off to boarding school at age 4. So if he went away to school at age 4, Nanny Mueller cared for him for the first 4 years of his life, first 3.5, 4 years of his life, which would make the Nanny Mueller and Niles relationship even more disturbing.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also an episode, I think the title is That's Midlife, where I think Maxwell talks about when he was a kid, and I won't get into all of why it's relevant to that episode, but he makes a comment about how Fran asked him where were his parents when he lost his first tooth or whatever, and he's like, oh, they were on safari. They had the headmaster put something under my pillow. I can't remember what dead animal thing was put under his pillow, but something from the safari was placed under his pillow by the headmaster because he was already in school. So yeah, okay, fine, you found a plot hole that now is bothering me. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
You're welcome.
I mean, thank you, I guess. I don't know.
So we can discuss that, I guess, too, further when we get to those episodes. But yeah, those are just some of the things that there is just some inconsistency, or it's not very clear, certain aspects.
Well, just as a side note, I was watching an episode, which we will discuss in just a few weeks. It was in season 2. And I noticed an inconsistency where, because previously we talked about how Uncle Stanley is played by Fran Drescher's father in real life. He's on as Uncle Stanley, and then he refers to his wife as Aunt Cookie. But then in season 5, Aunt Cookie is played by someone else who is not Fran Drescher's mother. So there are little things like that. They don't keep me up at night, obviously, but I just noted them as I was watching. It's like, oh, that's interesting that they changed that. And they changed some of the actors. Like we talked about this in Stop the Wedding, I Want to Get Off, that Twiggy played Maxwell's sister Jocelyn in season 1, but then she was replaced by someone else in season 5 and 6. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to talk about notable fashion from season 1?
I think that's a great idea. I kind of took some notes and broke my comments into, I guess, 3 different categories. So like iconic, favorite, and things I didn't really care for. I think we should start with some iconic things. First and foremost, I think the bathrobes that she's constantly wearing to breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I think of season 1 fashion, the first thing that pops into my mind is the pink bridesmaid dress from Here Comes the Brood. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah, it's memorable.
it's memorable. Other memorable things that came to mind, the Bob Mackie dress she wears in Ode to Barbara Joan.
Mm-hmm.
And then that black midriff showing feathery shirt she wore in Personal
Mm-hmm.
Business.
Yeah. And I would just add to that category the red dress from the first episode. I feel
Yeah.
like that's a pretty iconic look.
Yeah, especially in the way it's presented. She
Mm-hmm.
steps out onto the funny, never to be seen again
Yeah. Stairwell.
staircase, and they start playing The Lady in Red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good addition. Do you want to tell us about your favorite fashion from the season?
So I'm thinking, like, again, I don't believe I have like a very favorite look in general. There were some looks I enjoyed more than others. Um, but I think we've talked about it before. Some of those, her tops and stuff, um, some of the flowy tops, like the
Mm-hmm.
sleeves and the ruffles and stuff. But, just thinking about it, there's not one outfit that necessarily speaks to me. I don't know. Like, not one that really jumps out to me. Um, is there one for you that like just really?
So, also just as I'm thinking about it, I want to give credit to Toward Wardrobe Files on YouTube, who compiled a short video of showing all the outfits that Fran Fine wore during season 1. So if you want to review that, our wonderful listeners, I highly recommend it. And I guess tweet at us if you have favorite outfits,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, because
Um,
it was a good refresher. I did watch it. And there were things I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of like that, but there was not one that like I really was like, oh yes, that outfit. So I'm curious if
yeah.
you.
So um, there are two outfits that really stuck out for me. One is that Twiggy vest, or what's known as the Twiggy vest. It's the rainbow striped vest that she wears a number of times. I think it looks fantastic. Um, and then interestingly, my favorite outfit I think is actually in episode 1. It's what she's wearing in the last scene where they're at her parents' apartment, and Maxwell basically coming to offer her job back, and she's
Mm-hmm,
wearing this black bodysuit, I guess, and
mm-hmm.
it has a lace up at the top, and then underneath it is this purple shirt with a little bit of a bell sleeve.
And
I would
that did stick out to me, kind of. I will say during
it
that recap thing.
it's so I don't want to say basic, but it's so simple, and it looks so good on her. I would not wear it because the whole idea of a bodysuit seems like more work than it's worth. Um, but I like the way that looked. If it was a two-piece, if it was like pants and a vest, I would be in 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Then I guess the last category you had was kind of like fashion. They're like, nope.
Pretty much, yeah. Things that I didn't really like, or things that I was just like, eh.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of memorable outfits that I didn't really like is from the Imaginary Friend episode when they go to the office and she has that like vegetable.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah.
So that's the second piece of food themed attire she wears in the season, I believe.
Oh,
It
really?
in the first episode, when they go to the bridal shop, when she brings the kids to the bridal shop, she's wearing a fruit themed outfit.
Mm-hmm.
I knew you were going to bring up the food fashion, and so I also had it on my list. Yeah, I probably wouldn't wear that. So the in the first episode, it's like a watermelon, I think, is the theme, and then as you pointed out, it's a vegetable. There's like an eggplant and I think a tomato, an imaginary friend.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't like the multicolored jacket she wears and Schlepped Away.
Mhm.
It's kind of like I described sort of like as a Joker type
Yeah.
jacket.
Mhm.
Like the sleeves are kind of, I want to say funny, but that doesn't describe them properly. Like it's like they're individual pieces of fabric that make the sleeve, and so they flop around a bit. I don't care for that.
Mhm.
Um, some of her jackets I didn't care for. Um, yeah. Was there
Yeah.
anything else that stuck out to you that you really didn't like?
There was that. No, it's hard to describe. There was like maybe that really bright pink plasticky jacket.
Oh, is it the one she wore in the Maggie the Model episode?
Maybe.
In
Yeah, I
Maggie the
can't
Model,
quite
she's
recall.
wearing it's sort of like a plaid, but it has different colors and
Yeah.
it's sort of like plasticky,
Yeah.
shiny. Yeah, oh,
Yes.
I don't care for that either.
Yeah. 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 It looks so fake. I don't know. Like the plastic
Yeah,
element of it. Just anyway.
yeah,
But yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, should we talk about some notable New Yorkers? Did you have a favorite guest star or any you
So
didn't like? Or
so interestingly, there are some that again were just kind of fun, like, oh, I recognize that person. So again, like James Marsden as Eddie was kind of like a double take for me. He didn't really have a significant role aside from like the first episode and then um the episode where they go on the date.
Mhm.
Um it's again uh interesting that a lot of times when it's a very well-known person, those episodes I didn't tend to like as much because they like I don't like again, there's great actresses that came on like Cloris Leachman and then later Rita Moreno was the gym teacher, but
Mhm.
but their character's not my cup of tea. Um it's fun to see some of the 90s child actors show up. So for instance, in Here Comes the Brood, we had the actor who was in several things in the 90s. He was in The Little Rascals. He was, I think, in Full House, that kind of stuff. And then later, the child actor who played, what was the kid's name? It was the Sunday in the Park with
Frank.
Frank. Like he was also in a ton of like 90s stuff. So it was just kind of fun to be like, oh yeah, I recognize that, actor. Um, but I don't really think there's an overall kind of favorite. What about you?
So I thought about it and I like went through the list of episodes and I was like, okay, well, I'm really bad with actors and actresses, despite all of the research I try to do before we record. Um, and so I kind of just answered the question by thinking to myself, which episode with a prominent guest star did I like the best? And I think it came down to Stop the Wedding, I Want to Get Off.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed,
Twiggy.
yeah, I enjoyed Twiggy playing Maxwell's sister. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed the whole character arc there. That's a great episode.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay.
Um, so I guess we should talk a little bit about Yiddish Cop, and I'm going to say exactly what you think, but everyone knows I'm going to say is that there are constant violations of kashrut, which if I wasn't watching this with a critical eye, I would probably just ignore. But now we're watching with a critical eye and a critical ear, and
Mm-hmm.
it annoys me. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've
um,
learned a lot.
I am so glad. Now you can start sprinkling your everyday parlance with Yiddish words.
Mm-hmm.
One of the goals of the show is to teach. Um, so I guess into our 90s nostalgia, does the series feel dated to you?
Uh, yeah. I mean, it feels very 90s to me. Now I can still watch and enjoy in 2021, but it's very clearly from the 90s, if that makes any sense. What do you feel?
Well, so I guess it's kind of the same thing. I obviously take a lot of comfort, and I love this series. Clearly, this is why we're doing this podcast, so I can share my love of the Nanny with everyone and anyone who will listen. Um, and so like it doesn't bother me that it is from the 90s, that it does have a 90s vibe. But taking a step back from my love of the show, I've sort of come to realize that most of the TV I watch, like basically if you watch anything that wasn't made in the last, like, let's say 5 years, it's going to feel dated
Mm-hmm.
because our society and technology has changed so drastically
Mm-hmm.
that everything else feels dated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we've talked about it a number of different points. It's not just the old cars that I have to point out, but it's like how different this an episode would be if people had cell phones, if people could
Mm-hmm.
text. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and
Social media was at play.
exactly. These things have changed the way we interact with each other and the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so
And then,
anything that doesn't have it feels
mm-hmm.
dated.
Well, and some of the just the type of humor they use, for instance, in
Yes,
some instances, wouldn't necessarily fly. Um,
today.
yes.
I think that's right. I mean, there are
Mm-hmm.
jokes that they couldn't, or I mean, they shouldn't make today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, it's sort of it's hard to go back and watch something from 20 something years ago and try to hold it to today's standards. It just doesn't work because
Mm-hmm.
everything is a product of its own time.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Um, yeah, I'm gonna again point out all the old cars because I
Mm-hmm.
have to point that out every episode.
And again, very much the fashion is
Yeah,
very nice.
that might be making a comeback. Who
Yes,
knows?
that is what's interesting is the cyclical nature of fashion, where there are certain like pieces that have been worn by the various characters that I'm like, oh yeah, that's making a comeback. But the hairstyles, we haven't really talked about hairstyles, but the hairstyles are also very 90s.
Well, actually, let me ask you: are they very 90s or are they very 80s?
I think it's kind of in that gap,
The reason
maybe
I'm asking is
the
because
early 90s. But
because
yeah.
as we're talking about fashion coming back, there's an episode where Fran and Val go to, I think, their high school reunion, and I can't remember if it's their high school reunion where they make this comment or if it's their camp reunion. Anyway, they go to a reunion and someone makes a comment about how, oh, you see your hair, everything comes around again, like implying that Fran's hair was dated even at the time.
Mhm.
And so that's what makes me wonder if it's 80s and not 90s. Although you and I were not alive in the 80s, so we don't
Yeah.
know what was
Yeah.
contemporaneously in then. And
Yeah,
we
we
were
just know what's in media, or
correct.
like movies and music videos and all that from the era. So, but like Maggie's hair seems to me very 90s. Like
Interesting.
that cut, that kind of bob.
I just kind of thought it was sort of boring. I didn't
Mhm.
I didn't assign a time period to it. Um,
Well, like yeah, the bangs. I don't know.
yeah.
But
No, that's a
overall,
good point.
and the makeup, like how they do their makeup. Um, but but yeah. So,
So I guess we should talk a little bit of I've sprinkled in some future fun.
mhm.
I'm not going to go into anything else specific. I'm just going to say we got 5 more seasons to go.
Yeah.
Um, and we have a lot coming our way and a lot of things I'm really excited to talk about. A few things I'm not
Mhm.
so excited to talk about, but we have a
Mhm.
lot more fun coming. And I can't wait to continue discussing the series with you.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So we kind of talked before about ratings. We talked about what our current average ratings are. I think it wouldn't be too fun to go and say all the numbers episode by episode just because that's difficult for listening.
I
But
agree.
ask, are there any particular episodes that you would change your rating retrospectively?
So I did put some thought into that this afternoon. And I remember at a number of times saying, oh, maybe I'll change my rating. I can't for the life of me remember which episode I said that about.
Mhm.
But I think there are 4 that I would like to adjust.
Okay, go for it. Tell us.
Okay, so the Nuchschlep, I
Mhm.
originally gave it a 4. I
Mhm.
think I'm gonna give it a 4.5. Um,
Okay.
just thinking back on it, I did enjoy it. I liked I know what I think I know why I gave it a 4 instead of a 4.5, because you were right. The whole idea that Fran and Eddie would date is kind of concerning.
Mhm.
Um, but just taking that, I mean, I can't take it out, but like in hindsight, it's just kind of funny, how sort of stunted Fran is, and how like Maggie thinks that her boyfriend is, going to go after her nanny, and that's not at all what is happening.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm going to give it 4.5. Although I got to say now, as I'm saying it now, I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't. But no, I'm gonna give it a 4.5 because
Okay.
it's a fun episode to watch, and yes, there are issues with it, but it's funny. And nothing bad happens, so I'm gonna go with that. So
Okay.
that's one. The second one is Personal Business. That's the
Mhm.
episode with Brock Storm where Cece and Maxwell agree to throw Fran into the deal to get Brock Storm to star in their new musical.
Mhm.
I originally gave it a 4. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I did not, thinking about it. It doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy the way a lot of other episodes do.
Mhm.
Um. So yeah, I'm me.
Mhm.
Um. I might actually add a fifth one as I'm thinking. Um, Maggie the model, we gave it a 2. We both gave it a 2.5. I'm gonna give it a 2.
Mhm.
In even rewatching season 1, I don't like it. Like
Mhm.
I just skip it. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Um, Family Plumbing, I gave it a 4. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 because that is an episode that I do enjoy rewatching. And yes, there are problems with it. Um, but it's fun to watch. And then the last one I want to change is Deep Throat. I gave it a 4, and I think that was because you're right. The timing of it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why would she check into the hospital the night before her surgery and things like
Mhm.
that? But that one is just so much fun to watch, particularly like the end scene where after Fran's had her tonsils removed, Cece's tormenting her and making the comment like, "Oh, let's talk. Oh, that's right, you can't." And she sits down, she grabs the bottle of yellow liquid and takes a sip, and Fran writes on her little whiteboard, "That's not apple juice."
Mhm.
So I'm giving that one a 5. Those are the ones I wanted to adjust. How about you?
Okay. I originally gave the pilot a 4. I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Okay.
Smoke Gets in Your Lies. I originally gave it a 5. I'll bring that down to a 4.
Okay.
Because again, yeah. That's the one I keep referring to whenever we're like, we're gonna adjust the rating. Um, and then let's see here. I think I might join you in making Maddie the model a 2 because I was just not a fan of that
That's fair. Come to
class.
the dark side. We have cookies.
Hmm.
Um,
So yeah, but I think those are the ones that stick out to me as adjustments.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we talked so often about possibly adjusting, and then looking back, it was sort of hard to identify where we'd want to make those adjustments.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, wonderful listeners, if you have any thoughts and want to tell us your, favorite episode or your least favorite episode, or have strong feelings or thoughts about an episode, tweet us, right?
Hmm. Yes, or email us.
Or email us. Yeah, whichever is
Either
more
way.
convenient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
What do you think of the season as a whole? Like, if you hadn't already agreed to review
mm-hmm.
the entire series with me,
Mm-hmm.
would you be interested in continuing?
Yeah, just because again, some of the relationship dynamics, I'd like to see how they unfold. The again, I discussed it in the last two episodes. I really wish they would have switched the order because I really do feel like Franny's choice would be a much stronger season one finale.
Yeah.
Um, and like if I was watching it back then, like I would have felt like I can't remember Mama um is or I don't remember Mama is too abrupt of an ending.
Hmm.
But yeah, in terms of like overall, I'm obviously very interested in Fran and Maxwell. So I look forward to see what happens in the next season.
Yeah. No. It. I obviously am very excited to continue discussing the series with you. And would continue to rewatch it even if we weren't doing the podcast. Clearly. Um,
Hmm.
I look forward to all of the shenanigans that we have left to talk about.
Hmm.
So, um, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I don't believe so. It's just been yay, we finished the first season.
Five
We
more
did
to go.
yeah.
Well, the only thing I want to say before we wrap up is thank you to our wonderful listeners who have agreed to go on this journey with us, and
Yes,
we hope
yes.
you enjoy it as much as enjoy our podcast as much as we enjoy producing it. Um,
Yes. And feel free again to contact us on Twitter or email if you have anything in particular you'd like to see happen or you have any commentary or anything like that.
we're all ears.
Hmm.
So,
Obviously, in a friendly way.
right, be kind, I think is what we asked in episode one. Be kind.
Yes.
This is our first podcast that we're doing together. It's my first podcast I'm doing, period. I think it's also your first
Same.
podcast. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are not professional podcasters, clearly. We are just doing this for fun, and we hope that you all enjoy it as much as we do. So, anyway, we're all ears. Be kind. All right.
Mhm.
Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 23, Fran Light.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.